Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Darko Audio Podcast. This one very quick on the heels of the last. And once again, we're joined by Srajan Ebaen in Ireland. Welcome back, Srajan.
Good to see you, John.
And today, Srajan, we're going to plough through a whole bunch of news items, but we're not going to just sort of repeat the press releases verbatim. We're going to try and dig in a little bit further than that, I hope. That's the plan for this one. And I believe you're going to kick us off today.
This episode is brought to you by AudioQuest. The cable company believes great audio performance begins with great power. Visit audioquest.com for more information.
So for those that are only listening, John is going to have to explain what I'm showing him.
Oh my goodness.
John, what is this?
It looks like a speaker grill. It's a grill, with two cutouts on the back, and it's got a white fabric on the front.
What is it for?
It is for prettying up the look of a loudspeaker, but hopefully without compromising the sound. The grill material.
We could kind of sort of say it's about transformation, right? We want to transform the looks of something.
I guess so, if you want to be dramatic about it.
Okay. So, what do we see here?
Could you turn it a little bit? So it looks like a speaker box with a almost invisible grill on the front, but I can just about see the drivers through the front.
Who do you think it's by?
No idea. It looks like an ELAC, but it's not.
Okay.
Okay, so you're going to hold up the speaker again, this time with the drivers exposed. Oh, it's a Zoo. It's the Zoo method. Very cool. I guess the actual color is white. Is that correct, Srajan?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, Zoo method bookshelf. Impedance, is it 8 ohms? I had no idea they'd done that with the grill. That's pretty cool.
That's the only reason why I wanted to show this, because we've covered this in an earlier podcast, the speaker and what it's all about. But that's why I wanted to be a little bit dramatic about the transformation bit. Because to be honest, I have never seen a speaker that transforms that much just by virtue of putting a grill on. Because if you get the speaker in white and the drivers are black, you have very high contrast sort of hardware looking at you, and you have a really big port like a bore. And if you put a white grill in front of that without any kind of branding, it looks incredibly plain. Like it really decor friendly. You take the grill off and now it may only be something that your mother will love.
Do you know, it's interesting though, because I think I'm one of those people, probably like a lot of our audience today, who prefers to listen with the drivers exposed because we think it looks cooler.
Well, this way you can have it both ways. Right. And this grill has some magnets in it that just snap right onto the exposed posts on the front baffle, so it's very, very easy to get it on and off. But Zoo, who I believe are now in business for at least 20 years, never ever had a grill. It's taken them 20 years to cave in. And I think it makes a huge difference. More than on most pretty much any other speaker I can think of, because Zoo has such a signature look. You know right away what you're looking at. But when I showed it to you covered up, it could have been an ELAC.
Yes, it could have been anything, yeah. I mean, I think they've knocked it out of the park if they wanted it to be completely plain on the front. I've never seen that before. I don't think on any speaker. I'm sure there's one out there that somebody in the comments can tell us of, but yeah. All right. Well, I'll kick us off properly with something that sells for €50, right? And it's a little dongle that is a USB dongle. It plugs into a phone or a laptop or a tablet. And the idea is that it can stream Bluetooth. It comes from Sennheiser. It's called the BTD 700. Now, why would you want this when your phone already streams Bluetooth? Well, it's to give you access to, I have to use this word very carefully, higher res codecs. So I'll read what I got translated for, because it was a German press release that I received. And it says the BDT 700 supports aptX Lossless and aptX Adaptive codecs for reliable high-resolution wireless audio with up to 24-bit depth at 96 kilohertz. Now, when I read this, it always rankles me when it comes to Bluetooth, because I think what manufacturers are doing here is they're exploiting the fact that many people don't know that the high res we get over a data network is not the same as the so-called high res Bluetooth that we get with these kinds of connections. Because high res Bluetooth, even though it has its own little sort of yellow label, I think certified by the Japanese Audiophile Society, it's not the same as the high res we have and we use at home. So because high res audio and even lossless audio is significantly larger than lossy in terms of file size, it has to be compressed in some way to fit down a Bluetooth pipe. The pipe's invisible, right? So when this was announced, I had to make points of order on my website about, first of all, the high-res Bluetooth is not the same as high-res over a data network or the high-res we get from Tidal or Cobas or Apple Music or whatever, and that no Bluetooth codec on the planet can do high-res audio without throwing some data away. So it's lossy. So all of this is lossy. Now, this is I'm saying all of this irrespective of the argument as to whether you would hear the difference. I don't know, because we don't have the opportunity to hear it. Well, I guess we do if we stream it through a data network. I guess somebody could try it, but if you're at home, then you have a choice, and why wouldn't you just choose the lossless version? And if you're out and about, you don't have a choice because you just can't do it over Bluetooth. Anyway, so this little dongle allows our phone or a laptop to stream outwards with aptX or with aptX Lossless. Now, aptX Lossless is confusingly not really its own codec. It's the top layer of aptX Adaptive and is only engaged when the environmental conditions are perfect. So you're not in a busy or noisy Bluetooth environment, right? Which I think frustrates a lot of people. One of my patrons has already bought one of these little dongles and says to me, yeah, it was a bit of a fuss to work out whether aptX Lossless was engaged or not. People want lossless not just because it gives them CD quality audio, because this is only relating to CD quality, right? Lossless CD quality. They want that, I don't think, just because it sounds a little bit better, but because they want bragging rights, or they want to know that they're hearing what was on the CD out in the street, which I think is fair enough. So knowing whether aptX Lossless is engaged usually depends upon your hardware, right? Because the receiving hardware also has to support aptX Lossless. So if it doesn't matter whether you have this dongle or not, you're never going to get aptX Lossless. So you need the sender and the receiver both to support the same codec for that codec to work. So I guess, so with this BDT 700 from Sennheiser, you'd need to pair it with a pair of headphones that also support aptX Lossless. I think that's the biggest selling point here, the aptX Lossless capabilities, because aptX Adaptive doing high res, it's lossy. So let's not worry about that too much. But the lossless transmission of CD quality, I think, is of interest to many people, and not many phones around the world have aptX Lossless capabilities, transmission capabilities, which is why Sennheiser have made this thing, because their Bluetooth headphones, their flagship Momentum models, are capable of aptX Lossless. Now, Sennheiser were very cool. They had the foresight to tell you when aptX Lossless is in play with their headphones inside their app. So when you're using the Sennheiser app with your Bluetooth headphones from Sennheiser, it'll tell you like aptX Lossless is engaged. I don't think many other manufacturers of Bluetooth headphones do that. So it's just so, this whole aptX Lossless thing, I tend to think it's a bit of a wash, because you have to fuss over whether it's engaged. You have to fuss over whether your Bluetooth headphones can do it. You have to then keep checking your receiver device for it to tell you whether you've got aptX Lossless in play or not. And I think the biggest thing is that if obviously if you're in a busy environment like an airport, aptX Adaptive will step down from that aptX Lossless top layer to something of a lower bit rate to keep the music playing. And Sony's LDAC does exactly the same thing. It has 3 tiers for playback, for quality, different quality tiers, and it will auto adjust according to environmental conditions. And at 990 kilobits per second at the top tier, it's super close to CD quality. And if you're in an airport and it's noisy, even with noise cancelling headphones, could you tell the difference between the top tier of LDAC and the top tier of aptX Adaptive, which is aptX Lossless. Man, this is so unnecessarily complicated, isn't it? But could you tell the differences? Probably not. But like I say, I think people want aptX Lossless just for bragging rights or to satisfy themselves internally. I think it has less to do with what they or we hear than it does those other sort of psychological factors, really. So this little dongle, €50, you can try it out, but please make sure that your headphones have aptX Lossless in them so that you can get the full benefit. Otherwise, I don't know why you'd bother. And if you've got LDAC in your headphones, then just pair it with an Android phone, because iPhones, this is the other thing, iPhones don't do any of these advanced codecs, which is probably why you need this dongle with an iPhone more than anything else. So I'm just twisting myself into knots trying to explain this. So anyway, that's my first item. Unless you have any questions, Srajan, I'm going to tap out.
I have a question for you now.
Mm-hmm.
If I say to you additive manufacturing, what comes to mind?
Well, I would say this is the opposite of subtractive. So if you're sort of milling something out of a single block of aluminium, that's subtractive, right? You're taking stuff away to get the shape you want. So additive, I guess, would be just adding stuff to other stuff to build the shape you want or the product you want.
Very, very good. In fact, 3D printing is considered to be additive manufacturing.
Right, okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, if we say 3D printing and we say Hifi, do you know of any instances where 3D printing is used for production items, not just prototyping?
I think, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that VPI some years ago had a 3D printed tone arm, but I wouldn't swear on that. I'm like 8 out of 10 on that one. But
I have heard the same thing. I think there's at least 1 or 2 head shells at the end of the tone arm that is 3D printed. I believe that the quote-unquote meta material, which is inside Dan Clark headphones and which is inside of my Aeon headphones, those are 3D printed.
Right.
I've heard of gaskets, unusually shaped gaskets between, let's say, a loudspeaker driver and the cabinet. Mm-hmm. So when it gets screwed in, that gasket compresses and it forms an airtight seal. They might be 3D printed. And in prototyping, for certain, I've heard 3D printing being used, for example, for waveguides. Mm-hmm. That in some kind of simulation software, you will figure out what the shape, the curvature, the diameter should be. You print it out, 2 hours later, you can test it, you can change it before you commit to getting something milled out of aluminum.
Right.
Okay. Now, for those that are only listening and not watching...
You love the show and tell, don't you? Okay, you've got, I'm assuming it's a 3D printed item. It looks quite complex, actually. Oh, God. It looks like it's not even a ball of wool, is it? I don't know how I would describe this, but it's quite small. It's about the size of a very small cat's head, because I can hear your cat in the background. Now we've got 2 of them, or one's larger than the other one. So these are kind of like a lattice network of something.
These are component footers or loudspeaker footers.
Okay.
So,
Srajan, your cat, every time your cat, I think your cat has, does he want to be picked up?
No, he just woke up.
He just wants to be heard.
Yeah, he just wants to be heard.
Okay.
So inside we have a hollow space.
Yes, yes.
Here I've got a hexagonal shaft with a threaded bolt.
Right.
That shaft sits in here.
But that's a metal thing, right? That's a metal piece, right?
Just a stamp. And now I can screw this into a loudspeaker, an amplifier, whatever.
Into the base of it to support it, right?
To replace the stock footer.
Right.
The interesting thing is that they have 3 versions. And so this is the medium, this is a large, and there's also a small. The medium is €99 for a set of 4.
Okay, this is... Okay.
And they can take 40 kilos.
That's quite a lot, yeah. Okay.
The small one is €60 for 4. And that can take 15 kilos. And then for somebody that has a really heavy amplifier or loudspeaker and needs to support 80 kilograms, there's the extra large, this one, which is 160 for 4. And it's 3D printed out of
Just for
polyethylene terephthalate glycol,
Of course it is.
which is apparently PETG, very similar to what drinking bottles are made out of.
So essentially, it's plastic.
Essentially, it's plastic. The interesting thing is that in one direction, you can squish it. It is
Right.
elastic, but in the other direction, you cannot. And I put the big one underneath my subwoofer. The subwoofer weighs some 50 or 60 kilograms, and then I sat on top of it to add my own weight. And this, I didn't see any kind of give whatsoever. Anyway, so this is a clever way of using cost-effective 3D printing for hi-fi, but this is just the introduction. Because what I really want to talk about, from the same gentleman, is a loudspeaker, also 3D printed.
A 3D printed loudspeaker?
Yes, see now we
Holy
get,
smokes.
now it gets interesting, all right? Now I'm going to have to rewind a little bit. As some of our viewers or listeners might know, my wife died earlier this year.
Yes, yes.
And there's one loudspeaker manufacturer who, when he found out about it, he had visited us because I was reviewing their speakers, and he spent some time with my wife. So he had a personal, if not relationship, then definitely a strong impression. So when he found out about this, he emailed back and he said, condolences and all of that. And then he said the only way that he would know how to express his sentiments properly about this news would be to make a loudspeaker and then name it Yvette. That's my wife's name.
Yes, yes.
So when he said that, I thought to myself that I would tell him a loudspeaker concept that Yvette would have really enjoyed. And then I thought to myself, no, he doesn't need my help. This would be his expression of his sentiment for Yvette. I don't need to give him any kind of input whatsoever. And it might have just been sort of a momentary emotional gesture, and next time he actually does need a new loudspeaker, he might have already moved on. However, the idea that I was going to tell him 2 days after I had it, I actually saw that speaker. The speaker that I was proposing that he built and called Yvette, I saw that loudspeaker. Okay, the loudspeaker is called the Viper. And it's by the same gentleman that makes its footer. And this gentleman's name is Gregory, Rulker. He's Polish, and he's one of the 2 owners in Qualio Audio and Cube Audio.
Right.
And he's also the gentleman that goes to the shows with his 2 Schoeps microphones and a camera, and he does a whole show coverage with like audio samples in each room. So he by now has about 15 3D printers in his house. And he's into loudspeakers, and he wanted a small loudspeaker for his desktop because he spends a lot of time working and he wants good sound. And with Cube Audio and Qualio, he was stuck with very basic cabinets. Because to get really fancy cabinets made, you might have to go to China. You may have to order 500 pairs at any one time. It's a big investment. So they're getting them done locally, but they're just rectangular boxes. Nothing special. And he was sick and tired of like doing another box. And then it occurred to him that, wait a minute, some of my 3D printers are large enough to print a speaker cabinet. And so then he thought, well, if it's 3D printing, why not do something 3-dimensional rather than flat panels that you then somehow glue together, or maybe they don't need any glue, you're just layering them up while you're printing them, right? So he has made a box completely printed with 1 centimeter thick side walls that are really 1.15 millimeters thick because they are consisting of little pyramids. So little squares with little pyramids they're facing out, and they're facing in, but they are offset. So from peak to peak, the wall would be 15 mil thick, but if you really measure it, it's just 10 mil.
Gotcha.
So it has a very textured look on the outside. It's very unique. It has the same textured look on the inside, which then obviously acts to diffuse and break up standing waves, right? It's using a 6-inch midwoofer on the front. It's using the Mundorf dipole air motion transformer in a very short open baffle on top. And then on the sides, it has dual 7-inch passive radiators. Now, I'm going to have to look at my cheat sheet for the dimensions, because this is one small speaker. It's 16... Now, is this centimeters? 16 centimeters wide by 21 centimeters deep by 32 centimeters high. Just 7 liters of cubic volume. However, because Greg is into powerful low bass, this speaker goes well below 40 hertz. And it will play very loud, because the compound surface of the front-firing 6-inch midwoofer and the dual 7-inch passive radiators, that compound surface is 11.5 inches. So it's virtually a 12-inch two-way speaker that looks a whole lot smaller, because that big driver is broken up into 3 surfaces, 2 of them side-firing.
So usually if you have a small cabinet and you have low bass, the compromise is on efficiency.
Exactly, and this one is low. This one is just 83 dB. So
Not the lowest I've heard of, but okay, yeah.
So Greg recommends a 200 watt Class D amplifier, which does not need to be very expensive. There's some very, very cheap ones which he has experimented with. So that's the drawback, or the compromise, in order to get this kind of performance. Now there's something else that's interesting, and that is that this construction of PET, this is the material, which is what drinking bottles are made out of.
Yes.
That in his thickness, he claims that it is 8 times stiffer than MDF and 4 times stiffer than birch plywood of the same thickness. So not only is the cabinet really good looking, it doesn't have any glue or screw joints, because it's literally 3D layered up, like, you know, in droplets. But it's exceedingly strong, and it even comes with internal braces. Now, the one thing that we do not have yet is the price. I'm going to get the first pair to review, but he's still refining the crossover. The crossover is going to be a second order between 5 and 6 kilohertz. That's what he's fine-tuning right now. And I have absolutely no idea whatsoever where price-wise that is going to sit. The drivers are not cheap. They're by Dayton Audio, and this is called the EPIC. It's a dual voice coil carbon fiber cone that is good up to 10 kilohertz and goes well below 40 hertz. But considering how reasonably he has priced these footers, which he calls the Vibron, I would expect that the Viper, after the high cost of the drivers, should be very fairly priced. Now, incidentally, how long do you think it's going to take a 3D printer to print up one loudspeaker cabinet of the size we were talking about?
Yeah, this is the thing about 3D printing. If you want it done well, it's slow.
Right.
I would guess 3 days.
5 days non-stop, 150 hours.
Yeah.
For just one cabinet. Which is why...
It's 10 days per pair, right?
Yeah, or you have two 3D printers, and they're just working. But which is why a large speaker house, whose opening order would exceed what this gentleman will sell in a lifetime, they couldn't cotton to this kind of manufacturing. I mean, how many 3D printers would they need to do the kind of volume that would supply their distribution?
This is what I was about to say, is that just, it kind of brings to mind, oh God, I don't want to say this in a negative way, but it's kind of hard not to. It's just because you've got a good product doesn't mean you've got a business, right? So this product's problem is scale. So he might be able to make 50 pairs a year if he's really going at it. You know, that's one pair a week. If he's got 2 printers, he can do it, right? So, and maybe the demand is no more than 50 pairs a year, and he's just doing it as a lot of manufacturers do. I've got to say this, a lot of these smaller companies, they are hobby businesses, right? They're just there just for something to do, and if you can make a bit of money on the side, that's what's going on. And I've got nothing against it, especially when it brings either a lower price for similar tech or similar performance, or if it brings something interesting, because we're talking about it today. It's by definition, I think, interesting. A 3D printed speaker, I've never seen one before. So
I have pictures of it that we can post. And the last thing I should say is that obviously he already is running 2 companies, successful speaker companies. This one is under the name Virtual Hi-Fi, which is his own sub-brand or micro-brand that he's not partnering up with anybody else. This is just his sort of passion project.
Wasn't going to mention this one today, Srajan, but given that you've just mentioned this speaker, I will talk about a new amplifier from Cambridge Audio, which is called the MXW70, another catchy name. It's a half-width box, the same size as their MXN10 network streamer and DAC Magic 200. So they're meant to be paired with either of those products. Well, that's the intention anyway. Although, before I go any further, I will say that going DAC direct, you and I have discussed this many times before, isn't always satisfactory, is it? Sometimes we want to have a normal preamp stage with an active preamp in between the DAC and the power amp, because it adds some solidity to the sound.
Which I would agree with at the more affordable price levels.
Right.
And your experience, which I think surprised you personally,
It did.
was with the Grimm. Because suddenly with the Grimm, you had a very expensive streamer with, I don't know, is it analog or digital volume control? Whatever it is, it can be direct connected to an amplifier. And you actually preferred it direct.
Yes, but
correct?
it has an active stage in it, in that preamp. So it's not a passive volume control or preamp as are the MXN network streamer, MXN10 network streamer, and the DAC Magic 200.
So it has some kind of an active output buffer, just...
Yes,
okay.
Yes, it does. So I think that buffer is what lends preamps that kind of beefy, meaty sound, but also impacts their speed a little bit. So if you go DAC direct from, say, an MXN10 to this new power amp, it'll sound, I guess, a bit lean, but it will sound fast. That's my experience. I don't know about these 2 products because, as we mentioned in the previous episode of this podcast, when these things get announced, they're not even out yet. This is not, I mean, maybe this has started shipping this week, but review samples haven't gone out. I don't know if anybody's bought one, so no idea how it sounds. But I need to give you some details on this amp because it's Class D, it's a Hypex N-Core module, and that delivers 70 watts per channel into 8 ohms, which is probably not going to be enough for the speakers that you've just described. But
unless
go on.
It has 140 watts into 4 ohms, and the speaker I just described is a 4 ohm load, or that little Encore can be bridged.
It can be bridged. It can be bridged into 250 watts per channel into 8 ohms, so that would be fine.
Okay.
I think.
And you know what? The 70 watt rating makes me think that this is the smallest 5th generation Encore module that's out there. And Norbert Lindemann of the German brand Lindemann is using the same module, and he said that the people at Hypex, the current engineers, told him it was the best sounding module of the entire lot that they have. So the smallest, least powerful one, they consider to be the best sounding one. It must be the same one.
Quite possibly, yeah. I mean, weirdly, in the Cambridge Audio press release, they didn't provide a 4 ohm rating. Like, why? I mean, when there's an amplifier comes out, I want to know what class, I want to know what it does into 8 ohms and what it does into 4, and then maybe into 2, but that's not really essential. But 8 and 4, especially 8, are essential, right? So there are balance connected on the back of this amp. There's single-ended connected on the back. There's a trigger connection. You can trigger this amp on with the MXN10 over USB there's a USB trigger in the box as well if you want to go with that pairing. Although I would say, because the MXN10, it has no volume wheel on it, and the buttons on the front are for presets, so they're not for volume control either. So you're going to have to control the volume with the volume slider in the app, and that makes many people, including myself, a little bit nervous. You know, like, 'cause a swipe the wrong way. I think your cat agrees with this, Srajan. One swipe the wrong way, and you've blown your speakers, right? So, but the reason I'm mentioning this Cambridge, not only because it fits in with your 3D printed speakers, is because it sells for $599 US, or the same number in euros. So, as a little Class D amp that's affordable, that likely won't suck because it's got a Hypex module in there. I'm not saying that's a guarantee for success, but if what Norbert Lindemann says is true, this could be a good sounding unit, and it's super affordable, and it's small, and.
Yeah, and especially the bridging feature. If one eventually does need more power, just get a second one, even if it's like 5 years after the fact. Now, the one question I would have for you has to do with psychology.
Okay.
Do you think that yet another Hypex Encore amplifier, which is an OEM module stuck into a box with a branding on front that people recognize and trust, is that much of a selling feature? Or is there anything that Cambridge Audio has done or could do to it to make it their own? Because NAD, for example, is another brand that does Encore amplifiers, right?
Yeah, but isn't the sound of any kind of, let's say, Class D amp, isn't it determined also by the input stage that precedes the Class D module?
Apparently, there's a lot of tuning that can be done.
Yes.
But then I would expect a brand like Cambridge to brag about it. Like, what makes your Encore different or better or unique than everybody else's Encore? There's lots of those Encore amplifiers out there.
Yeah. But then NAD doesn't really. I don't know any I think maybe some of the smaller boutique manufacturers will talk about their analog input stages, but the bigger ones tend not to, because they want to tell you the power rating. They want to tell you how big it is, how convenient it is, right? I sort of understand that, because this product in the UK is only sold through Richer Sounds. Okay. So if you start talking about input buffers to the average consumer, they're going to glaze over. They're going to be like, what the hell are you talking about? Right. So I think where this is not a boutique brand, Cambridge Audio, well established around the world. I think because the price is so good, this will get a lot of people buying it, just taking a punt. I want to get one or two of these, $500, not much to lose if I make a mistake. If I have to on-sell it, I'm going to lose 100, 150. It's not a risky purchase, is it?
Right.
And I don't think there are many at this price point. I could be wrong, but if they are, they're from boutique manufacturers whose production volumes will be much lower.
Yeah. I mean, there would be somebody like Nord Acoustics who's repackaging OEM Class D modules, but then you don't have the brand recognition or maybe resale value or buyer confidence that you might have if you buy something from a high street shop and it says Cambridge Audio on it.
I guess I want people to understand that just because there is this Hypex module in this amp and the same Hypex module in that amp, they are unlikely to sound the same because of the voicing to the input stage done by the manufacturer.
Right.
It's not like this is replaceable for this and they're all kind of like generic piece of gear, because they're not.
Correct.
But whether there are huge differences or whether the Cambridge will sound better or worse, we don't know. But I think it's a nice price. It's not bad.
Okay, another question for you. And I think I know what the answer is.
Okay.
Do you play golf?
No, I do not play golf. I'm 2 meters, 2 centimeters tall, Srajan. I have to get custom clubs. It would cost me a fortune. And I don't have the patience for it. And no, not my thing at all. Sorry.
Do you know how fast a golf ball can travel?
No idea. Don't know.
What I was reading up on, it's at 290 kilometers per hour.
So like an Audi on the Autobahn.
I mean, I wouldn't want to get hit with that sucker.
No, not at all.
But now, what is the best way to stop a golf ball traveling at 290 kilometers an hour?
I feel like there's a catch here. Water?
No, just think about a golf course. Even though you and I haven't been on one, we have seen photos. So what is one of the features on a golf course besides the water?
Trees.
Yeah, and what else?
The grass.
Yes,
the
and then the
ground,
areas where there is no grass, what is there instead of the grass?
the green.
No,
Oh, you mean the hole?
the sand traps,
Oh, okay, the bunkers, yes.
the bunkers. And now why would sand stop a golf ball that is that fast really well?
Because it absorbs a lot of the impact without allowing the golf ball to bounce back off the surface.
Exactly. So they call this particle damping. Because the individual grains of sand are trying to move, and because they're surrounded by each other, they create friction, and that friction is turning the kinetic energy into heat.
Into heat, yes, yeah.
And that's why such a fast golf ball may not do a single bounce. It might spray some sand, but it'll, very unlike a tennis ball that is made to bounce really, really well and is bouncing off a hard surface. Okay, so where are we going with all that? We're going to a British company called Stack Audio. And it's run by two 30-somethings. A gentleman by the name of Theo Stack. And what's the other gentleman's name? Give me a moment. Josh Stevenson. Now they have two products for you, sir, because you do vinyl. They have a vinyl mat, and they have something they call a stabilizer. The stabilizer is a
puck.
It's a puck, but it's a light puck. It's not a heavy puck, so it won't load down a bearing. And the mat is different as well because it's 3 millimeters thick, and it's made out of some kind of a rubber, but it has 4 little nubs, little sort of pimples, with an indentation on the other side. And that creates a spring action.
Okay.
And that creates damping of the vinyl disc on top. And the prices are not expensive. We're talking about 89 euros for the mat and 232 euros for the stabilizer. Now, the interesting thing is that I found another stabilizer that is based on the same principle. And it's out of Switzerland by a company called, I don't know how you pronounce it. The Swiss would probably say Thales, Thales, Thales. And the Brits would say Thales.
Thales, yes.
And it's
Because it rhymes
probably
with
somewhere
Wales,
in between, right?
Yes.
But the Swiss one sells for 1,500 euros.
Holy smokes.
Now, what's the principle? The principle is a puck, hollow on the inside, terminated with a flexible membrane at the bottom, and filled with particles. So while this puck is sitting on the platter is spinning. Whatever vibrations are in the record are migrating beyond that flexible membrane, and they're trying to make the little particles that are dancing on the membrane move. And now you have particle damping of your record. Same principle, slightly different execution. They're using plastic particles with Stack Audio, and they're using brass powder or tiny little brass spheres with the Swiss item. The Swiss item is in a gorgeously machined puck. The one from the UK looks much more plain, but it costs less than a fifth. Now, my experience with Stack Audio goes to footers. And the footers have 3 or 5 chambers inside of them, also filled with different compounds, like granulated compounds. One of them is tungsten powder. And I've just recently put them under my speakers, and then I put another set under my rack. And they were very, very effective, much more than I thought they would be. I don't want to go into the details because I've already published a review, so those people that want to read up on it can. But again, cost effective, no nonsense engineering, sold direct from the UK, and by I think what would be the next generation of designers, because a lot of designers are our age or older. So they're gray-haired, they've been around forever, and they're probably just facing retirement pretty soon. But there must be a next wave, and if you're 30-something and you're launching a company in hi-fi today, then I would say you're an entrepreneur and you deserve some of our attention, like people like you and I that can help, get some visibility on new product and brand. Stack Audio from the UK, vinyl accessories, LAN accessories, and component and speaker footers.
Yeah, because Theo Stack, prior to this range of products, used to make a network streamer.
Yes.
And digital audio products. So people might know him from that, but he's pivoted to something else.
I believe in the very early days he did accessories for the Lin turntable. But since I don't know anything about turntable, I don't know what kind of accessories they were. But to this day, he makes something called, I believe, a LAN purifier, which is like RJ45 in, RJ45 out, and in between there's filtering and reclocking. And he has two of them, one upscale and one entry level. The upscale one is less than 1,000. The entry level one is, I think, about 250.
Okay. I want to talk about Chord Electronics. You might have read about this, but I'm going to talk about it. So, because this is really, it's expensive, but it's fun, and I think it's a bit cool. So
it's like Legos, right?
We're going to talk about Lego Hi-Fi, yeah. So I think many people will know what the Chord Hugo 2 DAC and headphone amp looks like. It's like the size of your hand. It's a portable DAC amp, right? Now onto that you can literally bolt, and you have to screw it into place, something called the To-Go, which is a network streamer, which, yes, it does Wi-Fi and Ethernet, but it only does AirPlay, Room Ready, and UPnP. So there's none of the Connect services that we tend to see on other more modern streamers. Now that is our sort of where I want to start, because I want people to have an understanding of how big it is we're talking about here. So what Chord are introducing this week, actually they teased it a year ago. We were talking about hi-fi shows and how frustrating they can be. Another thing that happens at hi-fi shows is they'll show a product, a manufacturer will show a product, and then you don't see it. And this was first demoed in 2024. I covered it in my video. It's only appeared like over a year later. So if we imagine a power amplifier that onto which there's like a little strip at the top which acts as like a docking spot for your Hugo 2 and To-Go, right? For both those together. So the little strip on the side of it are two headphone outputs, 3.5mm 1/4 inch, right? So because obviously when you dock the Hugo 2s, you dock the end that has the headphone outputs on it, they get locked away, so they have to be re sort of routed to the side, right? So you've essentially docked your Hugo 2 and To-Go into a base unit that's the same size but a bit longer because the docking bit at the end, and then it's obviously taller because the amp itself has some volume.
But now we've got three boxes sort of stuck together into like one, kind of, right?
Yes, yeah. So you've got the To-Go on the Hugo 2, and then that, once it's bolted together, on top of something, it's called the Suze amp. Okay. Suze, S-U-Z-I, or S-U-Z-I. Now that amp, details on it are a bit skinny, but I do know that it's class AB. I do know that it offers 30 watts per channel into 8 ohms. I do know that no 4 ohm rating again was provided, so I don't know what it would do. But I believe it's like a baby version of John Franks' Ultimate amplification. And the one thing I remember about that when he introduced it a few years ago was that it's based on some feed-forward design, I think pioneered by a chap called Bob Cordell. But I don't want to get lost in the weeds on that. People can go and look up Chord Electronics Ultima. They have a flagship amp, which is like 10 grand or whatever. But this is a much smaller incarnation of that amplification circuit inside this base onto which you can dock your Hugo 2 and To-Go. But there's more. So you can add something to the side of that configuration. It's called the multiplexer. Now this is for people who are frustrated that the To-Go, and therefore by association the Hugo 2, still relies on micro USB as the USB power input and the data input, because it converts those two inputs into USB-B and USB-C. It's a little thing that kind of just bolts onto the side, which I actually think sort of spoils the visual elegance a little bit, but I'm being super nitpicky about that. So you've kind of got this sort of, Lego system, but it doesn't stop there, because you can also take off your To-Go and Hugo 2 and slide on another new product, which is called the Suze Preamp, which is essentially the same size, obviously, as your To-Go and Hugo 2. It has a slight bump on it that allows for a volume control, because this is an analog preamplifier. No digital, no DAC, no nothing, apart from, it's got 2 line level inputs and 1 phono input that talks to either moving magnet or moving coil. And there are 2 sort of, what's the word that Chord used to describe the color of their buttons? Polychromatic color buttons that allow you to set the impedance and the gain for your phono cartridges. So you can either configure this Suze amp as a streaming amplifier, or you can configure it as an all analog affair, but you can't do both. But it's so compact, it's probably about the size of, I don't even know how to describe it, like a small book,
like an
maybe
an envelope, right? The width of a regular postcard envelope.
Yeah, but then maybe like 7 centimeters high.
But now, are they managing to put the power supply of the amplifier inside the box, or is it an external wall wart?
That's a very good question. We need to look at the back panel, don't we? I did deliberately put a photograph of the back panel. There's a DC 12 volt in, and it's a 4-pin DIN, so there's going to be an outboard brick for that, right?
Yeah.
I guess putting a power supply in there is too much. Also, actually, I should mention this, on the back of the Suze amp, there aren't any traditional speaker binding posts. It's just holes like you get on the back of many name amplifiers that only take banana plug terminated cables. I personally think that's a non-issue, but people who love spades or bare wire, they're not going to be happy about that. Talking of not being happy, we haven't spoken about the price yet, have we? Because this stuff isn't cheap. So the Hugo 2, is it £2,000 and a bit, something like that? The To-Go, maybe another 400 or 500. I'm guessing. I'm trying to do this from memory, but I do know that the Suze amp itself is £3,400. The preamp is £2,000. So if you want the all analog version, you're looking at £5,000. And if you want the multiplexer for your To-Go Hugo 2 bolt-on, that's an extra £300. So either way, you're looking at £5,000 minimum. And I guess this is for people who either want something small, or they want John Franks' Ultima circuit in something that doesn't cost £10,000, or they've got a Hugo 2 and a To-Go already, and they want to be able to dock that and then undock it when they go outside to use it as a portable DAC amp. Although generally these days it's kind of big on that front, I think. So I think this is another example of Chord Electronics being a bit wacky. in the spirit of innovation. I mean that as a compliment, actually. They're trying something different. A lot of people are not going to like it. They're not going to like the price. But as we've seen from the sales of the Hugo 2 and the Mojo 2, we know that it's somebody's taste and somebody else's budget. So this will sell. I don't know in how many numbers, but hats off to them for trying something that's a bit different.
Yes, and hats off for doing a bonsai audio amplifier that is not Class D. Like they manage reasonable power, but with a linear Class A, B circuit.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know how hot it's going to run. There is a little vent on the back. No, sorry, on the front. So I doubt there's a fan inside, but maybe they need to get air through it to cool it. Well, maybe it doesn't run hot at all. We won't know until somebody tries one. And I think it's also worth mentioning that if it's built anything like the Hugo 2 and the To-Go, it's rock solid, like it's super strong. Yeah. I actually dropped my To-Go and it just dinged the corner a little bit, and most other products would break completely. And it's made in the UK, not China. So I guess that's also one reason why it's on the pricier side, because it's not made in Asia.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't all of their stuff basically excavated from solid? Like they're not bolting together sheet metal panels, right? No,
it's all subtractive manufacturing, right? It's all milling and things like that. So It's all, yeah, I guess handmade they're in Kent, aren't they? I just don't know how well, they had an amp, I think, called the Annie, which was also a very sort of small Class AB amp. I don't think Chord have ever done Class D, not in the last few years that I'm aware. Yeah. Not that I'm aware of. I think John Franks is very staunch about Class AB. So they're trying to hit a market. Maybe this would be big in Japan, where people have much smaller living spaces. I was tempted by it to review it, but I just think the appeal for a YouTube audience is a bit narrow. Okay. I think people would see the size and see the price and suffer some kind of cognitive disconnect, understandably, and go, no. So, I mean, there's already enough cynicism and skepticism out on YouTube. I don't need to fuel it.
All right. So, if I tell you names like NASA, nuclear power plants, international university labs, server farms, hospitals, factories, what do all of those have in common?
They need quiet power supplies, quiet power lines. I don't know.
Actually, not bad at all. Yes, they need power. They need clean power. And they're all industrial clients. Mm-hmm. And industrial clients don't shop on beautiful boxes. They don't shop on wacky claims. They don't shop on expense. They shop on what's called hard specification. Mm-hmm. How much power comes out? What's the current? How many dB of attenuation, of noise, or EMI? It's all regulated. It all has to conform to international safety regulations and specifications, right? Mm-hmm. So, about 10 days ago, I get an email from Mark Gatley at Sound Chaos, a Swiss loudspeaker manufacturer whose loudspeakers I have. And he said that at the show in Munich, at the Alternate show, a gentleman came into his exhibit, introduced himself by the name of Vladimir Katz, who operates a company called OnFilter out of Santa Cruz, California. Has been in business for 15 years, and he sells EMI filters and power line product to the industry, like I just mentioned. And a couple of years ago, he started to get orders from audiophiles for two products in particular. One is called the Clean Sweep. It's a 2-outlet EMI filter with a resettable circuit breaker in the back. And I believe there is a hard-wired power cord on it. That sells for $599. And then he has something called the PDU, which is the power distribution unit with 6 outlets that sells for $997, basically $1,000. And he went into Martin's exhibit and said, could I get you to try my 2-outlet EMI filter? And Martin tried it out and said it had the same effect as this Puritan Audio Labs power filter, which is another company, but out of the UK, that comes out of the industrial sector. And Martin was asked to make the introduction to me, and if I was interested in reviewing this product, could I get in touch with this guy, Vladimir Katz, which I now have. And the product I will be reviewing is this PDU. It includes non-sacrificial resettable surge protection, which is basically, well, the worst case scenario would be a lightning strike. And when Yvette and I lived in Cyprus, in a rental home, we actually got struck by lightning.
Oh, wow.
And I cannot tell you, not only did the house shake, but my ears were ringing for days. It was that loud. It is unbelievable when your house gets directly struck by lightning.
Wow.
Now, we were very lucky that our landlord was a builder. he had built this house and he had installed over-spec'd circuit breakers. So when we got struck by lightning, those circuit breakers were so fast and they clamped down so hard that none of our appliances, none of the computers, none of my audio got ruined. The only thing that died were the telephone and 3 telephone repeaters and the answering machine. And that's because they were on a different line. And I remember next day going to the local media mart, whatever, and buying a new telephone and answering machine. And the guy behind the counter just looked at me and said, "Lightning last night, eh?" I said, "Yeah." Everybody knew. In Cyprus, it happens a lot.
You got off lightly.
I got off lightly. I could have lost everything.
Yep.
So I'm taking surge protection more serious now than I did before that incident.
I'm sure.
But so what this product purports to offer is EMI filtering. Now EMI is electromagnetic interference, and on the power line you measure it as spikes. Spikes beyond the regular AC waveform. And Vladimir was telling me that he was at the Costa Mesa show in California just a couple of weeks or months back, where he had a little exhibit.
It was last weekend.
And he said there was one very inquisitive showgoer who came into his exhibit, and that showgoer brought a little gizmo, like a little box that sells for $129, and you plug it into a power line, and it will measure the EMI on that power line. And that gentleman wanted to know whether all of these claims that Vladimir Katz makes for his company called OnFilter were holding water. So he plugs this little gizmo into Vladimir's EMI filter, and even though it's a very basic filter, right, it's not a sophisticated thing, it was reading 50 times EMI suppression. The gentleman came back half an hour later. He had gone to another exhibit where they had a $6,000 audiophile filter. And he plugs the same gizmo in there, and he gets a 2 times reduction of EMI. Not 50 times, but 2 times. So the audiophile version with all of the voodoo and the hoopla didn't really do very much, but had thick faceplate and weighed a lot, and this industrial ugly black box did the job. And so when I told Vladimir that yes, I would review his product, he was very clear saying that they don't make any claims that it will improve the sound. He said, we can't measure that, so we can't possibly make these claims. The only thing that we claim is that we reduce EMI. He said, when I went to Martin's exhibit, I was surprised that I heard a difference. But he says, I don't have trained ears. He says, I would like to break into this market, and I understand that a lot of the things we do are not appealing to audiophiles. We're not expensive enough, we're not big enough, we're not heavy enough, we're not beautiful enough, we don't have the audiophile parts in there, it's all industrial. But he said, I'd like to serve this market more than we're doing now. We've just gotten orders from audiophiles, but we want to focus on them more. So I'd like to get some feedback from somebody in the field. The unusual thing about this EMI filter is it just doesn't treat the hot and the neutral, but it also treats the ground. And it does that without defaulting on regulations. And ground is where a lot of noise ends up in audio. And you have heard this expression that circuits will shunt noise to ground. It's like a landfill. Everything gets dumped to ground because there it doesn't matter, except apparently it does very much. So for people that are listening or watching us who understand that clean power can be advantageous and can actually make sonic differences and make our equipment work better and possibly last longer, but who also are sick and tired of audiophile sort of elaborate claims that may or may not hold water and high pricing for bling, now have an alternative where you don't pay for any of that. $599 for a 2-outlet EMI filter that you could put in series. You could go from the wall into the filter and out of the filter into your power strip or whatever generates more outlets. That filter would treat it all.
Oh, so you could expand upon it with some kind of generic board?
Yeah, of course. Of course you could.
Okay.
The filter preceding it would treat everything that subsequently plugs into whatever follows it.
But the thing that follows it could also attract... Well, oh, yeah. Because it's the EMI on the mains, not airborne.
Yes,
okay,
it's
right,
EMI on the mains.
Right.
And Vladimir's website has a lot of white papers and videos that will actually show you what EMI looks like. And it will show you just how much above the AC waveform these voltage spikes are rising. And he will show you the before and after with and without his filter. So it's sort of very science and measurement centric. And website is onfilter.com.
It's pretty cool. I think I've seen a video recently or in the last 12 months of Furatech doing something similar. They have a device that measures the effectiveness of their passive filters, I believe. And those kinds of things, I think, are far more powerful to consumers than some of the claims that get made. I'm not going to use the V word as you did a few moments ago, because if somebody's saying, oh, our box reduces EMI noise on the mains by a factor of 2, it might not be as much as the OnFilter, but it's still, if it can be verified, it's still a valid claim. I'm not going to say it's voodoo or anything like that.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's for people who don't like the high pricing of some of these power products, because they're already on the back foot. They're already cynical. They're already thinking, well, this could be a load of bunkum, so I don't want to spend $2,000, $1,000 on this. So maybe $600 is where you dip your toe in the water, if only to find out whether this shit is true or whether reducing EMI has an impact on sound quality. Because this is what you're saying. This chap Vlad is not making any claims about that. He's just saying it reduces the EMI impact on your hi-fi gear, which may or may not have a sound qualitative impact.
Yes, and the generators of EMI that he mentions happen to be, every single one happens to be in my house. He said solar panels with their DC to AC inverters, variable speed motors in pumps, all the white goods, refrigerator, washer, dryer, heater, and then all the switch mode power supplies. All of those generate EMI on the AC line. And he was a little concerned about my subjective listening, because he said, that's not what we designed this for. But he said, what happens if I send you my thing and you listen to it and you hear no difference whatsoever? Will you then conclude that my thing is worthless?
No.
And I said, no, because even if it doesn't make any sonic difference, if your surge protection works, and if I can verify the EMI filter effectiveness, because he's going to send me one of those little gizmos, those $129, the same that the visitor to his show exhibit brought with him. He's going to send me one of those so I can actually test it for myself. I said, then this is like health insurance and motor insurance. You hope you will never need it, but you're buying it to have just in case. So I said, no, I wouldn't consider it useless at all. But it may just have no sonic benefit that I hear. It would be able protecting my equipment, and it will make it run better. And if I have extreme voltage spikes from a brownout or a lightning strike, I hope my equipment will be protected. Now I can't fake up a lightning strike to see whether his device clamps down fast enough. And even if I could, I wouldn't risk it. I wouldn't risk blowing up all my hi-fi gear just for a hi-fi review. So that's where trust comes in, right?
But also Martin in Munich has made your job almost impossible, because let's say you hear a difference, then you hear what he heard. Fine, okay. But if you don't hear a difference, then you're saying Martin must have imagined something when he demoed it in Munich.
No, because Martin was in a hotel
Hotel, yes.
with I don't know how many rooms and how many other rooms that were actually participating in the show and had all kinds of hi-fi gear plugged into the AC, and I'm in a single dwelling out here in the countryside amongst the lost sheep. So you would expect that my AC is maybe a little bit cleaner than a hotel.
Yeah, mine isn't. Well, I live in an apartment block with offices below, so who knows what the hell they're running in there. But
well, you have an escalator outside.
Elevator, just down the hall. Yeah, down the hall. Yeah.
Those things apparently also are like big EMI culprits.
Mm-hmm.
So if I have good experience with that, maybe you would be interested in taking a look at it yourself with this EMI filter.
From a personal perspective, I'm very interested. From making a video about it for YouTube, I'm not touching it with a 50-foot pole because I'm just going to get all kinds of bullshit in the comments, no matter what I conclude. Just because, like I say, the level of cynicism and skepticism is so high for power products. You know, I was talking about this with a cable company, and they were saying to me, John, we're glad you don't review our products because it won't help. It will only cause arguments and, you know, flame wars, and I think it's what they used to be called. It's counterproductive. So the only person, I think I mentioned this last time we spoke about it, the only person who could really make a powerful video about the effectiveness of power products is Cameron at Golden Sound. And I think he's got one, like I said it before, I think he's got one in the works. But I did ask him in Munich, when are we seeing it? He's like, I've got to finish that. So I don't know when it's going to come, but he's got the measurement gear to prove it. And I don't. So that puts me at a disadvantage with something like that is so controversial. So yeah, I mean, I would happily try one out, and if it made a difference, I go, yeah, that makes a difference. It might even be worth a few paragraphs on my website, but there's no way I'm making a video about it. Just I guess what you call a quality of life issue, you know. So it's just not worth it. Anyway, I've got one more bonus item.
Okay.
You saw me just lean off camera there to pick up my phone. So I'm ambushing you here a little bit, Srajan, because I'm going to show you. I'm going to do something now that I haven't done before.
All right.
In these kind of podcasts, but you could do in the future if you wanted to. I'm going to talk about shock horror music.
All right.
So I've opened up Apple Music on my iPhone. If I hold it up at the camera, I don't know whether you can see this.
Yeah, there's a Techniques SUR on 1000, Bossa Nova.
Okay, that's a playlist. Right, so there's Bossa Nova.
And R.E.M. Murmur.
Yeah, R.E.M. Murmur.
And then the Pixies Trump Le Monde.
Yeah.
And the Pixies Bossa Nova, and there's a playlist, yeah.
Yeah, so ignore the playlist.
Okay.
So we're just looking at R.E.M.'s Murmur. We're looking at Pixies Trump Le Monde. We're looking at Pixies Bossa Nova. Now, they're on my iPhone, and I've downloaded them.
Right.
Have you any idea why I would do that when I use Rune Arc normally, and then here I'm using Apple Music? Any idea why I might do that? I'm asking you an impossible question, really. It's not fair to you, really, to ask you this.
Yeah, I'm drawing a complete and utter blank.
So these are all Dolby Atmos versions of those albums. And they've all come out in the last few weeks. In fact, the Pixies came out yesterday because I saw it announced on their Instagram. People go, John, I thought you quit Instagram. I did. I quit posting, but I'm still there monitoring for news because Instagram is great for picking up little morsels of news. Like, for example, Theo are showing, I think, a DAC that's also a tube buffer. They've not named it yet. They're showing it at CanJam Singapore this weekend, or was it Shanghai? I can't remember. The CanJam this weekend. And it's got big VU meters on the front. It is pure catnip. I don't even know what it does, but I want one. Anyway, so I picked up this information about the Pixies these two albums being available in Dolby Atmos.
And isn't there some kind of a mix down algorithm that you can listen to Dolby Atmos over headphones?
Yes.
And does that actually work, or does it make a difference over the same track and just plain old vanilla stereo?
Yes, so I only use AirPods with my iPhone, so it is my understanding you don't need just AirPods. This should work with any wired headphone, but I've never done that, so I can't confirm it, and maybe somebody in the comments can explain how this works. But I use AirPods because they're talking over Bluetooth to this. I mean, these are lossy files. So essentially they're kind of object-based immersive audio versions of those albums, where somebody's gone back into the studio, they've taken the multi-track tapes, and they've relocated the sounds, and actually what happens in the stereo render of these, because I'm using headphones obviously, excuse me, is it sounds like super stereo. It sounds like things are further separated, spread apart, located more to the left and right extremes.
Do you have a little bit of front back as well over headphones?
A little bit, but it's not a huge amount.
Right.
But I would say, this is why I wanted to talk about these three albums actually. So the R.E.M. sounds bloody fantastic. It is so well done. Because the original stereo master of that has a good dynamic range, but it sounds a bit flat and a bit thin, because it came out in '83 originally, so it's right at the start of the CD era. So just a little bit, threadbare. There was a remaster done in the 2000s, which was too much the other way, too loud, but punchier. And one advantage that many people point to with Dolby Atmos versions is the dynamic range is greater. Not always, but in a lot of cases, and I would be amazed if Murmur isn't one of those. The two Pixies, I've only played Bossa Nova, I played it this morning. I wasn't that impressed by the Atmos. Well, I guess it's a remix really, isn't it? Wasn't that impressed by it. I wouldn't necessarily choose to listen to it over and above the original stereo, but I would say there is more a difference between the Atmos and either or any of the stereo masters than between those stereo masters.
Okay.
So if you want a more pronounced difference, you want the Atmos version. It sounds more like what many people would expect a remaster to sound like, like more alive, better separated. But it's more than that. I haven't played Trompe le Monde yet. I would add, just to kind of be a little bit antagonistic, that I think Trompe le Monde is my favourite Pixies album. It's the Pixies made 4 great albums in the late 80s, early 90s. Then they split, they reformed in the early 2000s, and they've never been the same since, as far as I'm concerned. The albums they've released since Srajan, I know this is not your stuff, your kind of music. This is what in the 80s was called college rock, and then became indie, and then indie rock, and then I don't even know what it's called now. I think it's just called dad rock, isn't it? Like the Pixies are dad rock now. R.E.M. is certainly dad rock. But these are just 2 surprise releases that came out with very little fanfare. They are of interest to me because I do want to keep my eye in with what's going on with Atmos, certainly on my phone, because there's no way I'd rewire my entire lounge room with an array of speakers for these albums plus the others that I have available. I'm trying to create a little sort of mini library on my iPhone of some of my favorite Atmos releases.
Now, are these part of your subscriptions, like to Apple Music or Qobuz or Tidal? Okay, so
they're available on Apple Music. I think some of them might be. I think R.E.M. One of my patrons told me is on Tidal as well, the Atmos version. But I don't really use Tidal for Atmos and never have.
Now, if
I've
you
only
were
ever
to,
used it on,
I don't know because I haven't done it. I do it with
Sure.
Qobuz sometimes, but presumably you could buy and download files from Tidal and Apple Music, right? And if you could, how expensive would Dolby Atmos remaster or re-release be?
So this is a very good question. So I Googled Pixies Dolby Atmos today to confirm when the Atmos version of Doolittle came out, and that came out a couple of months ago. I had no idea. So that's also available in Atmos, and that is also available as a lossless download, because Apple Music don't offer discrete downloads that you can store on your hard drive in theory forever. So if you want the Pixies Doolittle, so their second album, technically their third, but let's call it the second, as a lossless download, you can buy it from a site called Immersive Audio Album. And I went to buy it and it told me it's not available in my region, which was just like, oh God, here we go again. So Atmos downloads are not available. If they were available on Qobuz, I don't know whether you could pay to download them. I'm not sure. You can't on Tidal. I don't think any of this Atmos stuff is available for discrete download apart from these very specialist websites. Some of these releases go out on Blu-ray discs, but they're very limited. They sell out very quickly and they're gone within 2 months. And then you're onto the second-hand market. I did have one YouTube commenter telling me, oh, John, there are loads of Blu-rays with Dolby Atmos mixes coming out now, thanks to Super Deluxe Edition. And that's true. Super Deluxe Edition is a website. They're issuing maybe 2 or 3 releases a month, but that's not loads. Even in a year, there's only 36, right? For me, loads is 3,000, 5,000, right? That's when I would consider redoing my lounge room here with a Dolby Atmos speaker array. I would need to have albums in the thousands available to me in lossless format. You know what I said at the start about it being a psychological thing more than a reality thing. But right now, a bit of Atmos through earphones on Apple Music is enough to keep me entertained, to let me listen what's going on in the studio, really, what the Atmos engineer is doing to the mix, if anything. So the Pixies are quite subtle. Well, Bossa Nova is. Trompe le Monde, I don't know. Doolittle, I think that's the one most people will go to, because most people would disagree with me and say, no, John, Doolittle is the best Pixies album. As for R.E.M's Murmur, I recommend people go and listen to that yesterday. It sounds great, even behind headphones. So, yeah, I just thought I would bring that up today because there's certainly not been a press release. I just saw it and thought, oh, that's my kind of music, which is kind of rare in the Atmos field. So I thought I'd give it a whirl and mention it in this podcast. So, Srajan, if you find anything of note, whether it's a physical format, so a CD, or a download for future episodes of this, I'm happy for you to present them, because I know that your tastes are very different to mine, and I know that a lot of my audience will have more taste closer to yours than to me, because I listen to weird shit. Mind you listen to weird shit as well, so just different kind of weird shit. So that is it from me for today.
Same here. I think I'm all done.
Cool. That's a nice and tight episode.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
See you next time.